It's time for us to wake up. It's time for us to wake up. Wake up, thank God.
Hello and welcome back to Audio Bite. I'm so excited today to introduce my guest, Scott Stone. Some of you may know him through his Instagram handle, The Frozen Yogi, some through his website, The Integrated Individual. Either way, I couldn't be more excited to publish this episode. Scott and I initially intended to focus on men's mental health because this is a topic that I am so passionate about, but obviously cannot speak directly to. And so when I met Scott through a mutual friend, I was super excited to hear that this is the focus of his work. This is the passion project of his life. And this is based on his experience, his own struggle with his own mental health. And quite frankly, with life circumstances that are pretty universal, like misaligned career, difficulty in relationships, things that all of us face and all of us go through. So it was so profound, again, to recognize the simplicity in his story and the complexity that inevitably plagues so many of us through these challenges of life. But the conversation really took the direction of that which is applicable to both men and women. In discussing Scott's work, he is working with both men and women. And so we talked about his modalities of focus and the approaches that he takes through nervous system regulation, internal family systems and parts work, and somatic release. Throughout the episode, I caught myself having to just take a moment and ingest everything he was saying. He was dropping so many knowledge bombs and these many profound insights in all his responses. And it was really therapeutic for me to hear the way that he thinks about his own circumstances, the way that he approaches his work, and just his outlook on life and healing in general. So without further ado, Scott Stone. All right. Welcome, Scott. How are you?
Great. It's great to see you, Emily. Thank you for having me on the show.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to have you and to be discussing men's mental health, which obviously is not widely enough talked about in our society and in modern culture. So I'm very excited to be talking about the work that you decided to commit your life to. To start us off, can you share a little bit of your personal journey and what really led you to focus very specifically on men's mental health?
Yeah. No, thank you for the introduction. And it's always a trip down memory lane as I kind of remember what got me here. It was about, so it's 2025, so a little over 10 years ago. I was engaged to be married. I was working in corporate America. I was running a very large consumer goods business for one of the branches of a consumer goods company, a business for one of the largest companies in the world. And I had the six-figure salary, and I had the opportunity to buy a BMW and, the dream house, brand new, all the things. And I like to say I had it all, everything but me. And it wasn't until my fiance was actually the one who brought up calling it off. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Um, and what I like to say here, just to give credit to some of the men in these experiences, is based on my childhood, I didn't really have a choice other than kind of torpedoing myself. What got me into men's mental health was my own mental health. I became the guy that I needed. I didn't have this type of support to feel like I could navigate, just healing a lot of childhood wounds. And so it was quite literally, we call off the wedding, she moves out, and I am confronted with the deafening silence of an empty home. And the options were blow my brains out or figure it out and change. And I chose the latter. I
Mhm.
started to choose the former, but I decided that probably wouldn't be a good long-term strategy. So um,
No.
I started really with YouTube and Tony Robbins, and that
Yeah.
led to Unleash the Power Within and Walking on Fire, which led to me quitting my job, which led to me
Wow.
selling everything and starting over and moving to a new city where I knew one person. And that really started to pique my interest about healing and just a lot of what we'll call like alternative modalities to feel.
Hmm.
I grew up with severe asthma and eczema and all sorts of autoimmune conditions. So I was very attuned to allopathic medicine, and I was taking rounds of allergy shots and all that type of stuff. And
Hmm.
through a lot of nervous system work, a lot of therapy and breath work and all that, all of my asthma, eczema, allergies, heartburn, all that stuff is gone now. And
Wow.
it wasn't because I took more pills. And no shade on allopathic medicine. If that's what you need in your path, like that's your choice, it's your body.
Hmm.
It just didn't align with me. And so, or it's not even that it didn't align with me. I got tired of being a victim when I didn't have these substances. If I didn't have my inhaler, I didn't know how to breathe. If I didn't have omeprazole, I had heartburn. If I didn't have hydrocortisone cream, I had eczema. Like I just
Hmm.
didn't want to be a victim to my environment. And so I started to lean in. And if I'm being like blatantly honest, of when I called my wedding off in 2014, it wasn't until like probably 17, 18, where I
Hmm.
actually started to like dig in. And it
Hmm.
probably wasn't until 2020 when I hired my first coach, 2022 when I got my first like good therapist, that
Hmm.
actually made some like real progress. And so
Hmm.
to just like um to give credit in the regards to the timeline of like, for a long time I floundered, and some days I still do. I think it's important on the topic of men's health to understand that like we weren't given a good model for this. A
Hmm.
lot of us as boys heard like suck it up or don't be a pussy. I don't know if I can swear in here,
You can,
but
yeah, you're good.
like all this like crying's for girls, like
Yeah.
men have a really really rough hand dealt to them. I was talking on another podcast recently that
Hmm.
it is not like it's tough to be a woman. Don't get me wrong. Like there's a lot of inequality and that, and I think men got dealt a really crappy hand in regards to how to thrive and how to feel and all that as well, communicate.
Yeah.
Um, and so it just became a passion of mine, and just as far as I can see, will be my dharma, my calling into the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I so appreciate you giving that timeline because this is something I'm such an advocate of with, you know, modern society, the age of Amazon, where it's like instant delivery on your doorstep. This is not how healing works. It is non-linear and it takes consistent, conscious effort, especially when it comes to mental health, because it's all about patterning and programming. And as we'll discuss here, peeling back the layers of years of trauma and programming. And that sentiment is so, so important to drive home because so many people are lost to the the journey ahead, really. Like when you look at it all, it's too much to chew. And so people don't even try. And this is where they default to the pills and the quick fix. But ultimately, there is no true quick fix. It's still running from yourself and repeating those same patterns. So kudos to you for taking the path less traveled and for really carving that out for other men and boys to follow because we really need it now more than ever. You also touched on essentially the stigma around what it looks like to be a man on this journey through mental health. And so that's something I want to unpack and understand a little more because there is the aspect of what a man should be, but really that's not the divine masculine embodied. We have a very skewed perspective of this in today's society, and it's super unbalanced. It doesn't really hold space for the feminine to play through within the man as well. And that's important, being able to detect and discover your own emotions and communicate accordingly and know when to surrender and know when to work hard. Like there's a very fine balance there. So what, other than the stigma, like what else do you think is obstructing men from really getting it or having the opportunity to pursue a more holistic way of being?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing that comes to me is actually something I was talking with Katie about last night,
Mm-hmm.
which is something I came upon recently around like what this person was explaining as like the three steps that any person needs to take on their healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
And the first step in order to, so this is in regards to like, say you want to transform your relationship to, um, like you want to be more fully self-expressed in the world. And so the first step of that is safety.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to actually feel your feelings, you have to feel safe enough to feel them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And most that's a really subtle distinction, but like most people don't feel safe enough in their body to actually feel what's going on in their body. So they reach for something to take the edge off, alcohol, weed, porn, work, all that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
um, when a person's actually able to inhabit their container, their meat suit, and feel
Mm-hmm.
some of their feelings, we move into the second stage, which is emotional expression. So once you're
Mm-hmm.
safe enough to feel your feelings, then you can feel them, which is expressing them. In expressing your feelings is what actually allows them to come out, right? And you probably have heard, I'm sure you've heard this, like you got to feel it to heal it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you've got a lot of anger and resentment and bitterness stored under the surface, under the
Mm-hmm.
hood of your car, it doesn't go anywhere until you can express it. And you can't express it till you feel safe enough to express it. Now, that could be environmentally, that you move out of your parents' house. That could be somatically, that you don't disassociate when these big feelings start to come in,
Mm-hmm.
etc. The third step, which is the most important, which is the sustainable and the integration work, which is identity work. Right. So once you feel the anger, the bitterness, the resentment, the rage, the sadness, the disappointment, all that stuff, then the nervous system is actually in a malleable state where your identity structure of who you are for yourself can actually shift. And so the quote I like to use is, you can't change your life when you're too busy fighting for it. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is, for most of my life, I was stuck in a mild to severe state of fight or flight because of the trauma that I experienced as a child,
Mm-hmm.
physical, emotional, sexual abuse, all the myriad of, the charcuterie of trauma. And so until I could actually bring myself into a space where I was able to feel that and give myself permission and guidance, most importantly, guidance from trained professionals on how to feel some of this stuff, because it
Mm-hmm.
felt so awful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the identity work can start to happen of, I'm worthy to have the life I want. I'm capable of being this in the world. I'm good enough to have a human experience. All that
Mm-hmm.
type of stuff that a lot of people really struggle with. And that becomes the kind of pathway to transformation. And it happens in that order. And I think for men, we've been told to not feel our feelings,
Mm-hmm.
suck it up and just go to the gym and blah, blah, blah. So I think a lot of men struggle with even having the space, one, because they're often so busy trying to quote unquote crush it, slay the game, that they don't actually have any, they don't have the space to do so. I think the other thing,
Yeah.
because I was talking to a man about this last night on the beach, the every man wants to date a conscious woman until she calls him to account, until she
Mm-hmm.
challenges his integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote that I think of is I've heard before is men protect women in the physical realm, women protect men in the spiritual realm.
Mm,
Right. And so like y'all
yes.
are so connected to whether it's your intuition or, the source creative, energy that flows through you as the childbearing, thing you can do that we can't. Um,
Yeah.
you as women have this opportunity or ability to like, hey guy, I see you and I stand for you as your potential and your purpose and your passion in the world. And you're playing small right now. And, like all that type of stuff. And that could be really confronting for a lot of men. And so sometimes
Hmm.
what I have seen is a conscious woman will come into a man's life to challenge his inability to play or his, rock hard demeanor. And
Hmm.
and he's like, no, I don't let you in here because
Hmm.
emotional vulnerability is something that I wrote off a long time ago because I was manipulated in the terms of like, the parent being like, oh,
Hmm.
this is good and this is bad. One of the things
Right.
I heard from Peter Crone recently was this idea that as we come into the world as children, and this goes for women too, we make an agreement with our care provider that says, I will
Hmm.
become who I think you want me to be
Right.
in return for you keeping me safe.
Oh my gosh. That's like so profound. Yes.
And the
And
key
it's
is who
so
I think
sad.
the key is who I think you want me to be.
Yeah.
It's not a discussed thing. It's an inferred thing of like, oh, I saw when I raised my voice and you shamed me and sent me to my room that removed love. So what I'm going to do in the future is shut myself down because
Yeah.
I believe that will give me the love that you withheld from me in the past, right? And so we start playing these programs and then we become products of our habituation, right? It's
Hmm.
you do your habit long enough, it becomes your habitat, and then you live
Hmm.
inside of it, right? And
Hmm.
so many people don't understand why a fight happens and they just leave. Well, it's like, well, what show me what you saw as a child. Well, my parents would fight, my dad would just leave for an hour,
Hmm.
and granted, that might have been their strategy to okay, let's just let the dust settle, then we'll talk about it. But most kids don't see the repair, right? They just
Hmm.
see the event of argument, and then their parents figure it out later. So they internalize we don't repair anything. It just gets dealt with. But
Hmm.
we know like for anybody in relationships, that's not how this works.
Right. And overall, that's something I've noticed as a major flaw in modern times is lack of intergenerational communication. The idea that a child can assume the way to live. Like, yes, and also no, not at all. It's so important to have direct conversations with children early on. Like, they
Mhm.
get it, they're smart, they are so intelligent and wise little creatures, little beings. And in unpacking some of my own grief and trauma and backtracking, asking, how did I adopt these narratives, these programs that I have, views of myself, views of the world? And it's in exactly what you're describing. And so my parents did a great job. They did the best they could with the tools they had at the time. But it's also recognizing opportunities where there could have been explicitly stated frameworks that were set up. Like, no, you are perfect, you are beautiful, you are whole. Like basic affirmation ingrained in your child. Don't assume that they know how much you love them. Tell them. Tell them again and again and again. I feel like this problem is very systemic and it's very common. And it's because of internalized trauma that adults have, where they're not able to express in that way. They're not able to go into that place in their heart and show up in that vulnerable way for a child who they themselves is vulnerable. So it's this self-perpetuating shutdown, really. I
Mhm.
want to go back to these three steps you mentioned, and maybe this can tie into the work that you do. The first step, you said needing to feel safe in our physical space, in our body, maybe even mentally, emotionally, needing a degree of safety to be able to even be present. Most people are not there. So if you have a client who is that, how are you getting them like front and center and stable enough to where you can begin to crack them open?
Yeah. So we were talking a little bit earlier before we started about kind of the three main modalities that I utilize in my
Mm-hmm.
practice. So the first one being nervous system regulation, or what I like to use as either breath work or meditation, right? So how do we access or just start with being with the states of the nervous system that we're currently experiencing, and then using tools to actually change them,
Mm-hmm.
influence them. So the first, and then so there's breath work and nervous system regulation. There's somatic work in terms of getting into the body, and then the last one that I've participated in and studied a lot of and now use as part of my practice is internal family systems or parts work. And
Mm-hmm.
so in the safety aspect, a lot of it comes to somatic work. So how do we get into their body in a way, how do we help them inhabit their body in a way that is non-confronting, at least to start?
Mm-hmm.
Somatic experiencing is the somatic practice that I took on and practiced almost all of last year as I was navigating a ton of grief, which then
Mm-hmm.
gave access to a lot of childhood trauma that I didn't know somatically hadn't been dealt with, hadn't been held and like really expressed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then the last part being the internal family systems and really changing the perception and the identity structure of the way in which I view myself in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
so to kind of more explicitly answer your question, Emily, the way it works out of the gate is what I'll call like mirroring co-regulation. And so I consider myself to be a very calm person. And in regard to like holding space for someone else, if someone else comes in and they're like, I had this happen last week with a woman. She was like, I want to work on this limiting belief I have. And I'm like, okay, great. And so she's like, but I don't really know why it's there. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like, so,
Mm-hmm.
how does it occur in your life? Well, when I'm making a post on social media, I feel this type of way in my body. Okay, great. Where does that occur in your body? Oh, like right before I post, I get this tightness in my chest. Okay. Can you like get in touch with that feeling? All right. So now we're inviting them to cross the barrier from a cerebral experience into a somatic experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so what a lot of people don't understand is that somatic therapy is so cognitive therapy is a top-down approach. You start
Mm-hmm.
in the mind and you talk your way into your body, which because of all the trap doors and like all the parts that can take years. And for most people, cognitive behavioral therapy does take years
Yes.
versus somatic therapy, which is a bottom up approach. You start in
Mm-hmm.
the body and you talk your way into your feelings, which
Mm-hmm.
for most people is very confusing. When I started somatic experiencing therapy, I literally made the joke that I would pay $150 an hour to take a nap because I was just like, I'm going to go talk to this woman. I'm going to lay on this massage table with a bunch of stuffed animals and I'm probably going to fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
But what it was doing was it was allowing my nervous system to bring up a traumatic experience
Mm-hmm.
or just a feeling that I didn't enjoy that I would try to make wrong. And then it would allow my nervous system to settle. So I could bring up anger, kind of sit in it for a little bit, and then my nervous system would regulate itself. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I'm doing with this person of like, okay, so you have this feeling in your chest. Okay. Once we can establish the feeling and locate it in the body, then we switch back to the cerebral side of things. Like, okay. And we might even bring in a little bit of parts work and be like, okay, now that you've got in touch with that, is there any message that this feeling has for you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, like it's telling me not to do this. Okay, great. Like, could you ask why? So then we start this inner dialogue with this part. Oh, well,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want you to look stupid. And I'm kind of like making this up on the spot, but
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of this is like kind of common in the way it works. And oh, I just don't
Mm-hmm.
want to look stupid. Okay, great. Where'd you learn that? And oftentimes, boom, a number will pop up. Oh, 12. Okay, what happened to 12? Oh, I just like and the 10 to 14, 8 depending on the person. This prepubescent timing is when the identity structure starts to form in individuals, right? So 7 to 10 is that like coming of age of like I'm me, I'm over here, you're over there. I like this, the ego starts to form itself. And so a lot of parents struggle in that time because they were shut down. So
Mm-hmm.
the technical term is differentiation. It's when you start to differentiate from your parents. And for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of kids, they're like, this is who I am. And the parents like, absolutely not. This is what
Mm-hmm.
you eat. This is what you like. This is what you wear. This is what you do. These are your friends, right? This is what
Mm-hmm.
you're going to believe because they weren't taught to have freedom of expression. So why would they give that to their kids?
Right.
Oftentimes that competes with the narrative of that makes you a bad mom or that makes you a negligent father, blah blah blah. So we start to explore with an individual kind of more of that inner world, and then once they can start to see themselves as that child where it's happening, we
Mm-hmm.
we play between first and third person. So I start to bring in some neurolinguistic programming and what are called representation models of like, okay, do you see this kid?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind. I see him at the lunch table. Okay, great. Are you first person or third person? I'm first person. Okay, what do you see? Oh, there's food on me, or like on the table. Okay, is it in color? Is it in black and white? What we're doing is we're just trying to determine how clear the memory is so we can get closer to it. Okay, it's black and white. Well, maybe we turn it in color. Okay, maybe we make it your entire visual perspective. Okay, great. Now, can you see that person? And then we start to detach from the part, right? So that we bring them back into self energy. Can you see that kid at the lunch table who, is all alone?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. How do you feel towards them?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'm judging them. Like I feel shame. Okay. Can you show them that?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it starts to go back into the body of like, can you show them how you feel towards them? Can you show
Mm-hmm.
them the love that you have?
Yeah.
Yeah, what does that look like? Oh, I put my arm around them. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like how are they doing now? Oh, they took a deep breath. Oh, that's great. Okay. Are they open to talking more? And we start to work with that. And what happens is like most people think they know why they're blocked or stuck
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
addicted. And I can almost guarantee you don't, because if you did,
Yeah.
you would actually stop. and
Yeah.
and and the ego is like, actually, we're gonna put you over here, and this is the problem and all this stuff, and it's just half-ass across the city in another place that
Yeah.
you don't get to see, which we call a blind spot, that is
Yeah.
actually what's holding you back. And so working with these people to get back to the declarative narrative, I don't know if I've ever
Mm-hmm.
said it that way, but that is what it is. They declare a narrative that they made up that just got packed away, that
Yes.
oh, I don't matter. Okay, well, if you don't matter, how's your life occur? Well, it doesn't really matter what I do because I don't matter. It doesn't really matter who I date because they're just going to show me that I don't matter. It doesn't really matter where I work, right? So starting to
Mm-hmm.
get back to these very foundational narratives that we took on about ourselves or about the way life is or about the way people are for us, like, oh, people don't care about me, that type of stuff. um
Mm-hmm.
and helping them to go back to that like second part is, okay, can we feel that now? Can we
Mm-hmm.
feel that anger? Can we feel that disappointment? Can we feel that sadness so that the body can express it and then choose a new path? And then
Mm-hmm.
once that perspective shift happens, then we can talk about affirmations and habits and all that stuff. But if you don't shift the perspective before, as Peter Crone says, you're the best version of your limited self. You don't
Mm-hmm.
actually have anything other than a new meditation practice or a new, cold plunge thing, which as
Mm-hmm.
soon as someone stops doing it, they're only as good as their habits. So then they revert,
Mm-hmm.
which can be exhausting, which is why so many people have Hashimoto's or thyroid disease or chronic fatigue, is because they are running from a narrative that they created that they have
Mm-hmm.
no idea they did because it was
Mm-hmm.
20, 30, 50 years ago.
Yeah. And it's deep in the recesses of their mind.
Yes.
I like to call it building a house of cards on a wobbly table. And this is what we
Yes.
see so much of in Western medicine and in society at large. As you mentioned, all these different coping mechanisms. But again, most tragically is the fact that this is kind of the basis for our modern medical model. And it's problematic because it leads people to believe there is something inherently wrong with them. Because, as you said, they get to this point in their healing process where they have done enough coping that they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. But then one thing happens and it wipes away all that progress because there was not deep healing. And so that's what you are uncovering.
I'll say something on this regard because you mentioned this idea that people inherently feel like there's something wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was doing this is 2020, maybe 2021. No, it was 2022 because I had broken up with my girlfriend and I was deeply alone in this like healing phase of my life, like really confronting these things that I couldn't see because I was too distracted with the stress of our relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
so I did I think it was maybe 4 gram mushroom journey.
Mm,
And one of the craziest things happened coming out of it. I remember I was sitting in the bathroom and I looked over, and for whatever reason, my bathroom vanity was like the doors were open. And I was like, huh, that's weird. I don't ever leave these doors open, but I guess I should go look inside of here. And I looked inside the the vanity, and I saw a pair of clippers, like a shape, like a head clippers, for
mm-hmm.
shaving your head.
Mm-hmm.
And it instantly brought back the memory when my partner at the time had shaved her head as a surrender practice in yoga. You shave your head like fully.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just shaved my head maybe like 4 months before. So I grew my hair out for 6 years and then I shaved my head. My spiritual teacher shaved my head for me, like huge practice, releasing all that weight and karma and whatnot. And it made me think of my ex. And I was like, wow, I have it that she is not struggling, that I'm over here in a world of sadness and grief and loneliness and all that stuff, and she's off gallivanting with her new partner. That's how I experienced myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I for whatever reason in that moment I had just enough space in my life to ask a question. And this is where, you ask a better question, get a better answer type thing. So I'm sitting there deep in this medicine journey, and I ask myself, what must I believe about myself to think that way?
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it clear as day. I was like, wow, dude, of course she's struggling. This has got to be excruciating for her. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
thought we were going to get married. Like, this is the first woman I gave my heart to after I called off my wedding, like, truly went all in. We were together for 4 years. And I was like, bro, of course this is hurting. And I was like, okay, so what must I believe about myself? And
Mm-hmm.
I, like, for whatever reason, I saw it. I believe there's something wrong with me,
Mm-hmm.
like that I've got to fix. And I've got all the evidence for it, all the courses, the workshops, the seminars, the retreats, the coaches, the therapists, all
Mm-hmm.
the trauma, all I've got everything I need to validate that I think there's something wrong with me. And now I'm spending all of my time trying to fix it. And I
Yeah.
shit you not, when I saw that there was nothing wrong with me and that I made that up, I let out a cry. I was like, the way I explain it is like someone killed my child. I was wailing for like
Mm-hmm.
40 minutes straight, probably, like just deep catharsis.
Yeah.
And I cried so hard I could feel my psoas drop, like psoas release, and my stomach dropped an inch inside of my body. And I
Wow.
realized like there's nothing wrong with me. There never has been. There like never will be in the sense of like narrative. There will only
Yeah.
be what's happening, but like that was profound. And how many
Mm-hmm.
people are so hell bent on convincing me that there is something wrong with them?
Mm-hmm.
People want to
Mm-hmm.
fight for their limitations, and it's like, I will
Yes.
let you have them as long as you want until you're ready to set them down. I'm not
Yeah.
in the business of forcing or advice giving. Like, I'm a very gentle space holder in that regard, because some
Mhm.
people, their whole life and identity was built on these things. And so to try and pull the rug
That
out
right
from them,
there, that right there.
yeah.
Their whole identity is that thing that they complain about that they don't want. It's this insidious form of entertainment that we have within ourselves where we're fighting the very thing that we're feeding, that we're
Right.
perpetuating in our own life.
Right.
And that's what's so interesting about your description of your work is the fact that it is accessible for people to go there within themselves. The practice you described, like I could sit here and walk myself through that.
Hmm.
Or, yeah, I could go to years of therapy, and in cognitive behavioral therapy, I could get there a little bit, but the mind is shape shifting much faster than you unpacking your stuff. So by the time you've made progress, it's already 10 steps ahead. So that's sort of the problem there. And as you described in the work that you're doing, not only do you have, a coach, counselor, therapist, a witness to help you to see and notice those blind spots and sort of catch them off guard, but to also get deeply to the root of the problem. And it's the same with psychedelics or
Hmm.
even deep meditation, like any type of initiation or very transformative process that you're immersing yourself in, maybe a fast or some other process.
Hmm.
Like being able to shock the system in that way where you're able to see with such precision and clarity. And then, as you mentioned, we get to the point which sounds to me what I call integration. It's the same thing of rewriting the narratives and reprogramming then the entirety of your life around this newfound belief.
Hmm. Yeah. The quote I use is integration, knowledge without integration leads to frustration.
Yeah.
Most people, they
Yeah.
listen to the podcast, they read the book, they go to the workshop, and then they have a bigger baseball bat to beat the shit out of themselves with because they know better, but they can't do better. They
Yeah.
have no idea why they can't do better, but they just know they should. And that's
Hmm.
where the parts work really becomes profound, because like I was talking to one of my buddies. He's about to sign up for coaching, and he came to the island for a retreat this past week, and he got to see how one of the things he was doing and keeping him small was actually a beautifully designed mechanism for him to feel safe in the world.
Hmm.
And I told him, I was like, I'm just going to stop you right there, bud, because it's really beautiful what you're doing right now. Is it speaks to how rooted you are in your self energy, in who you actually are, not a part, because a part might judge that experience of like,
Hmm.
oh, well, why do I smoke weed or why do I watch porn? It's like, well, let's look. And
Hmm.
what that
Hmm.
person might find is, as well, if I stay addicted to porn, that's good enough. I get the release that I'm looking for. I don't have to put myself out there. I don't have to try and date. I don't have to disappoint anybody except for
Hmm.
myself, which I always disappoint myself. So it's no big deal, right? That type of
Hmm.
stuff that someone takes on. But until they're in a space of safety and non-judgment, they're likely having another part that's like, well, no, we got to judge that because society says it's wrong. And it's
Hmm.
like, no, it's just the best you know.
And
And
it
that's
keeps us at odds with ourselves
right.
in such a damaging way. And that's what's incredible when you heal from a deep place within, you start to appreciate the the defense mechanisms, the shadow sides of self, the parts, all the parts, as you continue to call it. And that's what's so incredible. It's the fact that what used to be your kryptonite is now your ally. So
Mm-hmm.
anytime you see yourself attempting to distract, attempting to self-soothe, it becomes a process of self-inquiry. It becomes an invitation.
Yes.
And the healer inside of you is not judging that shortcoming. It's offering kindness, it's offering compassion. And then the two are symbiotically working together. And in this way, the work is weaving itself. It's taking you to this place really beyond that which you could have imagined. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
you feel that way about your own healing journey, like looking at your life now and just being like, whose life is this? And how did
Right.
we get here? It's such an incredible blessing. Um, you've referred to IFS and parts work a couple times. So can you break that down a little more specifically for those who are unfamiliar?
Yeah, totally. So parts work, IFS, internal family systems, created by a man named Richard Schwartz, is a therapy modality that believes that we come into the world as a singular entity. Emily came in as Emily, I came in as Scott, right? And then things happen, right? And then we take on parts and like parts of us, like you could almost say it like a fracturing, but a lot of people will think of that like schizophrenia, but like no, like things happen and then a part of our psyche is like, I'm going to manage that. I saw
Mm-hmm.
how dad yelled at mom, and so I'm going to manage that experience by being just annoying enough that dad starts to yell at me instead, because I was so scared when dad yelled at mom. So if he just yells at me, I can manage that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's a part. And so there are multiple different types of distinct, like levels, maybe you want to call it, of parts. There's managers, right? So the manager might be like, look, you know, dad always used to say like, don't be lazy. So a manager is formed, and in order to not feel the judgment of feeling lazy, I am super punctual, and I'm always, like I'm always productive, and I'm never
Mm-hmm.
bored and all that stuff, right? So that could be a manager in the sense of like, it's not super dire, but it's definitely something that's taking energy. Then
Mm-hmm.
you have protectors. And these protectors can be, you know, you get into a relationship and your girlfriend's like, hey, like, tell me how you feel. And the protector's like, well, I don't like emotional vulnerability. So I'm just going to like kind of beat around the bush and positive vibes only. Right. And so you protect the, well, what we'll get to is the exile. So the next one is a firefighter. And a
Mm-hmm.
firefighter might come in and be like, look, I know this isn't helpful, but like if I just like knock your ass out, I can take control and make sure you don't get into like some really negative things. And so a firefighter might be like, um, the coping strategy doesn't have a lot of like it works, but there's a cost, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for example, like maybe someone's struggling with an addiction, maybe someone's struggling with like cannabis use, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, I get super overwhelmed and I just reach for my bowl. I just smoke weed.
Mm-hmm.
And what they might find, back to this judgment that we have towards ourselves, they might be like, like, I really don't like this strategy. It makes me emotionally, tampered, and I get the munchies and blah blah blah. But like, yeah, but you don't have to feel despair or doom or shame or whatever, worthlessness. That's a big one for a lot of people. You don't feel
Mm-hmm.
worthless. So you just
Mm-hmm.
get high, and then you can think about how much your belly hurts because you ate too much. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then the last one is the exile. And the exile is the one that was essentially locked in the basement. It's the kid that got yelled at, it's the kid who got hurt and so, or hit. And
Mm-hmm.
so the protectors come in order to make sure the exile never gets felt. And so I'll just share a little bit of what my journey and like what that's looked like in myself. And so there is a part in me that like, and I've said this for years, like I so deeply love my family. I do this work because of them. They mean the most
Mm-hmm.
to me, all this stuff. And I like really prided myself on that of like, I'm the one doing the healing work in my family and I'm the one leading the charge. And
Mm-hmm.
for years, it felt very righteous. And then lately, the past couple of years, I've like really started working with anger and bitterness and resentment and like other feelings towards my family. And
Mm-hmm.
recently, within the past year, I started asking the question of like, what would happen if that part didn't do its job? If that part got reassigned, what would happen? And it blatantly was like, if I don't like tout how much I love my family and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
then behind that part is another part that is like, I hate my family. Like they make me so angry because of
Mm.
how much work I have to do because of their negligence or their abuse.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, like, so the part that is like super love and light and like, look at me
Mm-hmm.
and I'm doing it for my family and I'm breaking the generational curses. Behind him is a person that's like, I don't want to break these generational curses. Why the fuck did I have to pick up this tab? Why isn't
Yeah.
anybody else in my family doing this work? Nobody else wants to go to therapy, right? So there's an angry part behind it. And then when I
Yeah.
started working with that angry part, he was like, let me tell you why I'm angry. And just started
Mm.
showing me experience after experience of like, remember that abuse? Remember that abuse? Remember that shame? Remember that judgment? Remember that abandonment?
So
And
is
that,
that kind of the crux of IFS, is getting to that other side of the part?
um,
Or this is just a personal experience that,
it's a bit of both, right? It's not so much getting to the other side because that kind of like has an underlying agenda. It's more
mm-hmm.
about exploring what it is that these parts are holding.
Mm.
So if someone has like a really deep pain in their body, like, okay, let's go talk to that pain.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? Like what's in there?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's like, well, this pain is protecting me from feeling a different pain. If I'm
Yeah.
always over here distracted on my lower back pain, I
Mm.
never have to feel the worthlessness that I don't deserve a life that I want, right? As
Yeah.
crazy as that sounds, someone will spend their whole life complaining about chronic pain to not have to feel a bigger, more awful emotion.
Mm.
And that's how a lot of
Yeah.
people unknowingly live their life. They don't know how to like actually get in touch. And I've had it where I've gotten in touch with physical sensations in my body. I had it
Mm-hmm.
happen yesterday, actually, in my men's group, and I let out such a deep cry in front of 7 other men, just bawled my eyes out with no end in sight.
Mm-hmm.
And to have a safe container for these men to just be like, I see you, I hear you, I love you. We're not here to fix you. We're not here to give you
Mm-hmm.
advice. We're not here to change anything. We're here to say you are not alone.
And
And
how liberating for them to be a witness to that
right.
process.
And many of them were like, you just did work for me because I don't own how disappointed I am in my family. I don't own how jealous I am of my siblings. I don't own
Mm-hmm.
how angry I am at my parents. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
here's the crazy thing is like most people think that if they say it out loud, it's true. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, no, if you say it out loud, it's out of your body. Like it's out of your mind. And
Mm-hmm.
then you can work with is it true?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the toughest part, I think, that nobody really talks about is like until you express the built up emotion that's been carried from the past. The way I explain it is like trying to drive your car with the rear view mirror.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're driving down the street and you're like, okay, we're gonna go this way, but the way I'm gonna get there is I'm gonna look in my rear view mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're gonna crash, like that is a terrible strategy for driving. But it's the way
Mm-hmm.
most people do is they're like, well, I don't know what I do want, but I can definitely tell you what I don't want.
Right.
Which the universe is like, I'm sorry, all I heard is what I want. So I'll give you that
Yeah.
shitty relationship. I'll give you that body. I'll give you that bank account because you don't actually know what you want. So until you figure that out, I'll just give you what you don't want.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. Is there a way, one particular way that you have found trauma shows up in the physical body or the nervous system that is most common? And trauma, I'm using that term a little loosely. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
what is a main set of symptoms that one could look out for to know if their nervous system is maybe off balance? Because this is the other problem, is that the threshold for that has become so out of whack, and
Yep.
people who haven't taken the time to tune in with their body have no idea that they're running on overdrive. It's not even an opportunity that's on their radar. So what can someone look for as, a set of red flags?
I would say the most common one that I see people deal with today is anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
It's like such a
Yes,
common thing is
yes,
overwhelming
yes, yes.
anxiety. And
Mm-hmm.
and people don't understand that the meat suit that we're running around in is millions of years old
Mm-hmm.
versus the technology that is decades old.
Mm-hmm.
So we're running around with these information devices, these screens that provide us more information than the richest man in the world would ever get in his entire lifetime. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's something like a man can see more naked women in 15 minutes than Genghis Khan could have in his life, right?
Oh
Like
yeah. Yeah.
it's so the nervous system can't handle that. right? And
No.
so all this type of overwhelm, oh, kids are dying in Gaza and money's evaporating out of the stock. Like our nervous system's like, I'm just trying to make sure I don't die today.
Yeah.
Like I'm just trying to make sure that I got food for tomorrow. And
Mm-hmm.
so um, I would say anxiety is probably one of the most common indicators that something internally in your internal world is off.
Yeah, exactly. It's that
Now,
alarm bell.
right. And now the reality is like until someone learns how to sit still, it's very hard to understand what that voice needs. And
Yeah.
for some people, sitting still is one of the most awful feelings in the world. It's like a skin crawling because they're
Yeah.
dealing with like whether it's laziness or worthlessness or unproductivity. Like there's a lot of like internal narrative that gets really big when we sit still. I
So
also
what's the
like this.
first step there?
I also like to say if you sit still long enough, there's only one thing to do. And so learning how to slow your breath down through meditation is one of the most amazing things you can do
Mm-hmm.
to allow your body to come into homeostasis.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I will disclaim is that at the beginning, that doesn't feel good because your
Mm-hmm.
body is designed to keep you safe. And so some of that safety occurs as well, we're going to keep your breath really shallow. We're going to pretty much put you in a mild state of hyperventilation so that your body doesn't actually fall into rest and repair.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, what does that look like? Chronic fatigue and sleeplessness and jitteriness, like all that stuff. And so, the first step I would say, even before sitting down and breathing, is get into nature
Mm-hmm.
because there is an auto-regulative property that occurs when we go out into nature where
Mm-hmm.
we start to calm ourselves down. I do not find it random that we canceled nature during COVID. Like
No.
you couldn't go to the beach, you couldn't go to the forest, like you were not allowed to go outside. Like that's pretty weird.
Yeah.
But
So
giving
insanity. I also want
yes.
to share a quick aside because this, I think I've shared on my Instagram years ago, but when I was really sick, very, very sick with anxiety and depression, I was so uncomfortable in nature.
Mhm,
Like the silence was deafening. The comfort, the solitude, the peace that nature provides me now, that resonance was so uncomfortable. And
mhm,
especially, again, most of us are living in city or suburbia. We are not used to connecting with nature. Like the idea of connecting with nature is walking to your car in the parking lot. People think that's
right.
being outside, looking up at the sky for a second is enough.
Yeah.
And so this is the thing that I realized only in hindsight. I didn't realize my separation from nature at that time of my life, but I can see it very clearly now. And it illuminates exactly what you're talking about within the scope of meditation, of how uncomfortable it can be to actually be in a safe place
Mhm,
because the nervous system isn't ready. And so yeah, it's kind of like the idea of exposure therapy. Nature is such a good way to do that. But I guess my point here is if you are someone who has disconnected with nature or with your true self so drastically that even that is uncomfortable, like
mhm.
still just start there. Start low and go slow.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
psychedelics, like same thing. Just little by little, get yourself exposed to these more peaceful and tranquil ways of being, and naturally the system will heal itself.
Yeah, the other thing else that I'll plug because this is a really big one for me is community.
Mm-hmm.
Is maybe even before, not maybe before the nature thing because I think that's like
Like in
always readily
tandem.
available. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like we need to learn. We don't need to learn. We know it. We need to remember the importance that when the
Yeah.
storm was coming, we circled the wagons. We
Mm-hmm.
protected each other. Right now, the most important thing is take care of your friends and family and not at
Mm-hmm.
your own expense. There's too many people pleasers trying to like get their validation by self-sacrificing these days, but like find community in anything. I don't care if it's ultimate frisbee or underwater
Mm-hmm.
basket weaving.
Mm-hmm.
Find a place of people where you can go do something that's not heavy.
Yeah.
Because having been in this work now for over a decade, learn how to take a day off because it's not
Yeah.
going anywhere. Like it can be so heavy. Like I had a very intense therapy session last Wednesday to the point
Mm-hmm.
where I didn't do anything for the rest of the day. And I think that's another thing that most people don't talk about in the healing journey is the regulative energy it takes to bring yourself to a new like homeostasis
Mm-hmm.
can be exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And so having some friends to be like, look, we're just going to go on a picnic or we're going to like go axe throwing or whatever, like to
Yeah.
just not always be in the trenches, I think is super important. Get a dog, like do
Yeah.
something that's just
Yeah.
light.
Yeah, don't make your life a never-ending self-help project. That's
Right.
not what this is about. It's fascinating to me, the nuance between the evolution of healing. It's the journey is never over, it's never complete, and the lack of need to even pursue it in the first place. It's
Mm-hmm.
like if we can only wake up enough to recognize that right here is so perfect, it's so whole, it's so healed. It it could never have been anything different. It can't
Mm-hmm.
be. And yet, then we get in life and we're all of a sudden trying to fix everything and anything about ourselves. And so yeah, dropping out of the mind once in a while. Like, yes,
Mm-hmm.
pursue that better life that you know is ahead of you, but also just enjoy the now.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a profound piece of advice, and I love all three of those things as where to start. I feel like that's extremely accessible and actionable to anyone listening to this. I
Mm-hmm.
do want to discuss briefly some of the breathwork techniques you use. And actually, my guest from last month, we discussed some Wim Hof, so we don't
Mm.
have to go into that in too
Yeah.
much detail. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about the types of somatic release that you
Yeah.
focus on.
Yeah, so there's three different breathwork practices that I'm certified in. The first is Wim Hof method,
Mm-hmm.
which, for me, the big thing with Wim Hof method is there are excitatory states of your nervous system that get unreached without some level of big breath work. This is why holotropic breath work and
Mm-hmm.
others can be really powerful. Is reaching a barrier where you need to actually cross this apex to allow
Mm-hmm.
your trauma to express. So I do think there's some like really big benefit to some big breath works like that.
Is
And
that only done through breath work or also maybe use of psychedelics or
oh,
other
for sure.
modalities? Okay.
There's definitely other ways to access that. Because ultimately, like in Wim Hof method breath work or somatic release or vitality, or there's a lot of them these days. One thing that's important to note is that second to the brain, the lungs create the most DMT. So in
Mm,
order to have an endogenous created from internal to you, not taking a substance,
hmm
a psychedelic experience, you can breathe really into other realms of consciousness. And
hmm
in those states, your body switches from fight or flight into rest and repair automatically. Because a lot of people, when they breathe in, we'll say holotropic breath work, they find that they just pass out. They have so much oxygen in their body that their body's like, we actually need carbon dioxide too. So we're going to stop you from breathing. And they'll just go into a somewhat of a catatonic, like sleeping state. And I've seen this
hmm
a ton. And in those states, they are conscious in seeing light form beings or having a
hmm
conversation with someone past.
hmm
Or I
hmm
had this woman who had kidney cancer and God literally reached his hands into her womb and healed her. Like just crazy stuff, like absolutely wild.
I want to
Um,
interject there because
yeah.
that is such a fascinating phenomenon to unpack. And
Mm-hmm.
it happens in other practices too. I mean, people
Yep.
pass out while psychedelic journeying all the time. And
Yep.
actually, my yoga nidra teacher talks about this because people often fall asleep. And so
Mm-hmm.
she says, if you can, you are still essentially subconsciously aware, but like spiritually or consciously aware of
Yeah.
the guidance that I'm giving, even though you have fallen asleep and you've
Mm-hmm.
checked out at a very specific time in the practice. And so if you can take note of like when you're dropping out and when you're coming back in,
Mm-hmm.
because it's kind of like when someone gets in an accident or they get an injury and they pass out.
Mm-hmm.
the witness in them needs to leave. It's too
Mm-hmm.
traumatic. It's too much to bear. It's too much to handle. And
Yep.
so that's what's so incredible about what you're describing. Yeah, the physiological aspect of the gas exchange and balance, okay, but
Mm-hmm.
there is a real spiritual, emotional phenomenon occurring that
Mm-hmm.
happens by use of different modalities. And it's a way of the mind using a defense mechanism, but also still the body being able to innately heal through that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for
Yes.
letting me get that in there.
Yeah. It's no, it's like, and this is like one of the first questions I ask people is, do you think it can be healed?
Mm,
Right? Like, do you believe, right? Because your beliefs belong to your identity. And if your identity is no, it won't, then it won't. You're right. And
yeah,
some people are like, well, I don't like that. I'm like, okay, then try something else. Like, I can't. Like, why not? Like, well, I gotta be right. Like, okay, tell me about that. Right. Like
yeah,
it's a delicate balance because for like we said earlier, a lot of people like it is their identity. I am multiple sclerosis. I am chronic fatigue. I am abuse. Like, okay, fine. Keep it.
yeah,
Do you want to? No. Okay, then maybe let it go. I can't. Okay, then what? Like, it's just this like, remember the Notebook when it's like, what do you want?
yeah.
Um, but here's the interesting
Uh,
thing about it is like, and this is why I love what you just brought up with regards to like whether you're in yoga nidra or psychedelics or breath work or forest bathing, like
yeah,
people don't, I don't want to say this, like they don't think about the fact that like sleeping isn't a practice that we consciously do. We let go and then we fall asleep. We let go into the dream world. And the
mm,
same thing goes in a breathwork practice. Like I've had so many breathwork practice where I'm just breathing my balls off, just going ham on it. And then this thing will come into me and it will be like, why are you trying so hard?
yeah,
Just breathe. Like you don't have to try to breathe, just breathe.
yeah,
And that like instantly I'm like, oh wow, like this is my life. Like I'm trying. Like, and I make the
yeah,
joke that trying is lying.
yeah.
Like, oh,
And
I'm
then the
trying to be a good
download comes
mom.
through when you get out of the way.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. And
yes,
so yeah, like these practices that give us an opportunity to get into our somatic experience are so key because oftentimes like it's right there waiting for us. It's right there being like, here's what you're not feeling, being like, oh, I don't want to feel that today. I'll come back to my breath work tomorrow, like,
mm-hmm,
and so yeah, I mean, and a lot of people are finding different ways to ice baths, super big
mm-hmm,
contrast therapy. I think
mm-hmm,
a lot of people, especially men, use it to disassociate more effectively in a
mm-hmm.
societally acceptable manner. Like I don't smoke weed, I take ice baths. Like, okay,
Yeah,
how do you feel when you don't take ice baths? Horrible. Like, okay,
yeah.
like is it working?
Yeah.
Like so.
Again, the ego is so insidious and it will find it shapeshifts, right? It
Yes.
finds ways to make its own satisfaction, even in under the guise of self-help or spiritual work or whatever it
Yeah.
is. And so
Right.
it's perpetual in this way.
So you asked about breathwork practices, and I think this one's
Yeah.
so important. So I really want to share this. So the second practice and technically the third, they're both based in the same foundation, which is what's called intermittent hypoxic training. So
Mm-hmm.
Wim Hof, somatic release, holotropic, these are all super ventilative oxygenating practices. So they're causing us to be more alkaline by
Mm-hmm.
breathing more in than we exhale.
Mm-hmm.
The other side is intermittent hypercapnic training, which is increasing CO2 tolerance. And the reason that that's important is because the amygdala, which is the bouncer for fight or flight in our brainstem, first influenced before you ever see someone's facial reaction, a gun, the color red, any of that, before all of that occurs, the number one is carbon dioxide tolerance. And so if
Mm.
you're shallow breathing, apnea, anxiety, autoimmune disorders, chronic fatigue, Hashimoto's, if you're chronically hyperventilating, panting your way through your day, you will be in a mild state of fight or flight because you have a improper balance of CO2. So Buteyko breath work, Buteyko, not potato, Buteyko,
Mhm.
or oxygen advantage. Both of them do a similar thing.
Mhm.
Is essentially learning how to hold your breath. And
Mhm.
learning how to hold your breath means over time in the early stages of it, the roommate gets louder because the roommate's like, no, 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 we got to stay in fight or flight. We got to stay in this vigilant state because it's not safe if we get out of it.
Mhm.
Over time, we learn how to hold our breath, and then that voice calms down. This is
Mhm.
anti-anxiety. This is anti-panic attack. This is anti-apnea, anti-autoimmune disorder, anti-asthma. This is how I cured my asthma, which people would be like, you can't cure asthma. And it's like, okay, well, I haven't used an inhaler in like 5 years. So maybe I still have some
Never listen when people tell you you can't cure stuff.
right,
Never,
like,
ever.
right. I'm like, that's a bold statement. And so
Yeah,
I am the
yeah,
walking testament of every autoimmune disorder I've ever had. I've
yeah.
I've let go of.
So incredible. It's amazing. And I want to emphasize here, this is a practice towards vitality because you're
Yes.
speaking of it as a treatment approach, yes. And if you are someone who does not associate with one of these diagnoses, this practice can still change your entire life. Like anyone can benefit from breath work. And I'm really happy you brought this up because this was the foundation of one of our previous conversations. And I had not dove into this type of work yet. So, what about it do you think is more effective than the hyperoxygenation breath works?
Yeah, so the way I think of it is like I'm going to use a different modality as the example, but if you're only is like say if you get stressed out on a daily basis and the answer to your stress is you go jump in an ice bath to create a bigger stress so that you can be
Mm-hmm.
comfortable in the uncomfortable, you're a tyrant. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you will get some sort of adrenal fatigue because your body is so just getting beat down of like anger.
Mm-hmm.
No way. I just get in an ice bath and then I feel amazing. Like, okay, you can do that 3 times a day. Like what's the goal here? And a lot of dudes are like, fuck you for telling me that my coping strategy isn't a good one. I see David Goggins do it. And it's like David Goggins looks like a train wreck, you know, like even
I
Tony
can't.
Robbins, I don't want to trade lives with. You know, this guy's like, I
Mm-hmm.
jump in the cold plunge first thing every day. And I'm like, you can't sit still. You know,
Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
so for a lot of people, like myself included, let's be very blatant here. Like when I found Wim Hof for many years, my solution was get in an ice bath or do a breathwork
Mm-hmm.
practice because if I
Mm-hmm.
can fatigue my nervous system enough, it will become more manageable.
Mm-hmm.
If you want lasting peace, if you want true calm in your life, learn how to breathe slow.
Mm.
The mind, this is purely based in yogic philosophy. If the mind is stoked by the breath,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm.
If you want to
Wow.
learn how to last longer in bed, learn how to control your breath. If you want to learn how to be
Yeah.
a better negotiator in business, learn how to
Yeah.
control your breath. If you want to be a less reactive partner, learn how to control your breath. You know, someone was talking to me 2 days ago and she was struggling with her partner. And she's like, what advice do you have? And I was like, number one, I do not give advice because I don't know enough about your situation to pretend like I should speak over your life. So that's number one. Number
Right.
two is take a deep breath before you respond.
Yeah.
That changed my life.
Yeah. Well, it's the oldest piece of advice in the book for
Right.
a reason.
Right.
Like creating that space, creating that distance between you and the physical situation and you and your own dialogue.
Yes.
It's incredible. Yeah. So you've kind of alluded to it here a little bit, but what is your perspective when it comes to incorporating spirituality with the work you do or any one of these practices or men's mental health in general? Maybe that's a better question.
Yeah. I think spirituality has been severely pornographied. Uh, People think that if you wear a feather headdress and you go to ecstatic dance, you're spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say this from the standpoint of during my IFS journey, I distinguished a part called the spiritual bypasser. So I have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of compassion for the people who are like, yeah, my name's Lotus and I have no problems. I'm like, Okay,
Yeah.
tell me more, like, and I think the way I will explain it is a quote, which is pretty common for me. But the quote is, religion is for people who are afraid of hell, spirituality is for people who've been there.
Mm.
And so a lot of people who grew up in religious households and indoctrinated theologies don't have a great relationship with God. But
Mm-hmm.
what I will say, which has been one of the hardest things for me to heal, or just like the most, um, like it took it. I went fully around the block looking at myself before I went to my relationship with Creator. Was
Mm.
repair your like for anybody, repair your relationship with your version of your God. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care if you call it Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Allah, spaghetti monster. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
believe that there's something bigger than you at play, you're going to live a very hard life,
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like this, what I call God is the thing that beats my heart and grows the trees.
Yeah.
Like I am not separate from, I'm of God. I am not God because I can't make this tree behind me grow, but
Mm-hmm.
I am of God. And if that's the
Mm-hmm.
case, the next question is, do I believe in a God that's condemning and punishing? Personally, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, people are like, well, what about the kids in Gaza or the Great Barrier Reef? And I'm like, you don't think God has a plan?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, this is the way that this thing is choosing us to wake up, and so
Mm-hmm.
um
Yeah.
I really, and for me again, a lot of that access was nature, was going
Yeah.
out and seeing the imperfection and beauty in, a spider fishing off a stream in Eow,
Yeah.
like all that type of stuff. And it's for me, like spirituality has been a really interesting navigation because, like I said, Instagram made it, this is like a cultural thing versus like a truly spiritual thing.
Mm-hmm.
And um I definitely believe there's a lot of value in reestablishing a strong foundation with some form of creation. Again,
Mm-hmm.
call it universe, source, Jah, spirit. A lot of people have tough with the word God, which is fine. I don't care what you call it. I was raised
Mm-hmm.
Catholic. I did not associate, I was about to marry a Catholic girl. Like, I do not associate God as this dusty, white haired, white dude in the
Mm-hmm.
sky daddy. Like, I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you
Yeah.
talking about? But
Yeah.
I do think does play a very big benefit for a lot of people to have some connection on that level.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's completely fundamental to any healing journey and is a core wound for so many of us. And it's the wound where a lot of these other wounds stem from. So,
I often ask clients or just people I meet who are asking me about this type of stuff, I'll ask them, when did you stop trusting life?
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because you've never stopped trusting your heart beating. I mean, some people, right? Like you have like a arrhythmia or
Yeah.
something, like you might
Yeah.
cardiac arrest, you might question that. But like in general, your lungs breathe 20,000 times a day and you're not over there like, okay, Emily, like remember to breathe. Don't forget to beat
Yeah.
your heart. Like you don't sit there and be like, digest your food, release the bile, like, so there is an
Mm-hmm.
inherent level of trust that we have in this game. And when people are like, well, I don't trust myself, I'm like, well, you trust that you don't trust yourself. So actually
Yeah.
you are trusting something, and
Yeah.
so learning how to reestablish trust with life, I think, is absolutely paramount. And then the
Yeah.
other half is patience.
Yeah. And those go hand in hand. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
as you're on your journey and things happen that, again, maybe at one point had been unimaginable, certain levels of healing, whether it be mental, emotional, physical, you get to a certain point and you're like, the only explanation is the grace of God. Or as you
Mm-hmm.
said, this higher orchestration of creation that is working it all out with
Mm-hmm.
so much precision. It's very, very fascinating. And as I said before, I think completely fundamental. So, if you had to give one piece of advice to someone wanting to transform their life right here, right now, today, what would that be?
The first thing I would say, aside from the caveat of not wanting to give advice, the
Hmm.
first thing I would say, the first thing that was there, because I ultimately acknowledge a lot of the people I work with for it, is
Hmm.
having a sense of willingness. Like if you want to transform your life, just say that you're willing,
Hmm.
because then life will give you an opportunity to be like,
Yeah.
oh, you said you want to be more peaceful. How do you feel when that person cuts you off? Oh, you
Yeah.
want to be more
Yeah.
loving? How do you feel when your parents say they invalidate you? Right?
Yeah.
Like it's the whole like if God, you pray for strength, God gives you an opportunity to be strong.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a big aspect of it. Like you know, and I'll just say like I don't think most people want to heal. Most people want relief, but it's
Hmm.
temporary relief because
Hmm.
real deep change work happens on a very foundational level, which the idea is right. Your new life will cost you your old one. And
Yeah.
so I think the willingness to just see what parts of your life you want to shift and
Hmm.
what that could look like versus like go do breath work and blah blah. Like I don't. Some people it might be knitting. Like
Right.
you might like have a sartorial awakening from crochet, and who am I to say it's got to be breath work. Like no, like live your
Right.
life, and be open to letting life surprise you by showing you where you're not free.
Hmm. Yeah. Love that. What is one non-negotiable for your daily routine?
You would have asked me this years ago, it would have been different. What's there right now is water. Like there are some days I don't meditate. There are most days lately I don't do breath work or ice baths. Um, I don't go ground my feet in the fur in this, I grab my phone when I wake up. Like I'm
Yeah.
human. And that's new. Like I didn't used to do that. I used to sleep with my phone in another room, played that game, and then I
Mm.
just wake up and go walk in the other room and grab my phone. Like,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
so it's not grounding or tongue scraping or like meditation. Like it's yeah, drink water. I don't even electrolyte it anymore. Like I used to do element electrolyte packs and salt and lime. Like I've done so many of these things
Yeah.
that, I guess the other one lately, having a puppy, the other non-negotiable is some
Mhm.
level of play.
Oh, I love that. Whether or not we have a puppy, we should all be doing that.
Yes.
I mean, so therapeutic,
Yes.
so healing, so freeing. I love that. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I'd have dinner with my dog. I'd have dinner with Chester.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't think like there's no one that I idolize enough that I'm like, this is how I'd use that ticket. If I had any option, it
yeah.
would be I would just eat dinner with my dog.
Oh, that is so
Past
sweet.
dog.
Yeah. Mm,
Yeah.
that's so beautiful. If you could instantly master any skill overnight, what would it be?
Mining Bitcoin. um,
Yeah.
master any skill overnight. Maybe
Honestly, that's a
guitar.
great answer. Yeah,
Yeah.
that too.
Like old me again, like old me would have been like some technique that would have like made me feel more important or more special or
Mm.
more secure in the world. And what I realize now is if I'm truly honoring what's going on in my inside world, it would be something like guitar. Not because I would go play for other people, but because it's something I like. The other one that came up was cooking, like French
Hmm.
culinary skills. Like I love
Oh,
cooking.
yes.
I always make the joke that like I want to be the amalgamation of John Mayer, Francis Mallman, and Buddha. Like which if you don't know who
Yes.
Francis Mallman is, you need to watch Chef's Table season 1. This guy is he's like one of my inspirations in life.
I love
He's,
that.
yeah, but it's simple things like that, cooking and
Yeah.
guitar.
Yeah. So incredible. What was the biggest aha moment in your journey and your healing process? And that's a really loaded question for the lightning round. So maybe this distills down to like one or two words.
Yeah. One that's coming to me right now, I had the opportunity to work with Peter Crone a couple different times. And the first time I worked with him, he kind of extracted a blind spot that I didn't know was there as a narrative. which was I
Mm.
don't matter.
Mm.
I didn't notice that I was living my life inside of a belief system called I don't matter. And it made
Mm.
sense. You know, I didn't matter as a child to my brother to stop hitting me. I didn't matter to my parents to protect me from my brother and his abuse. I didn't, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
all the made up story that I don't matter went along with was running my entire life. And so when
Mm-hmm.
he showed me that I didn't matter for myself, it 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 crushed me in the sense that that was the world I was living inside of, but it freed me in the sense of like I'm available now for life.
Mm.
And so that was like
Wow.
pretty profound, I would say. There's probably a couple other ones, but I'll go with that one.
I love that. That reminds me of the day my therapist stopped me mid-sentence and she's like, "You keep saying I don't care. After everything that you talk about, it's
Wow.
followed up, but I don't really care. But I don't
Right.
really care." And it's the same sentiment of a total blind spot of numbing out the entirety of my life because it was too much to feel. All
Yeah.
the hurt, all the upset, all the frustration, all the things that I was coming to her with,
Mm-hmm.
convincing myself that I didn't care so I didn't have to feel it as deeply. And right, getting to the bottom of that narrative was so powerful and transformative and continues to be today because
Yes.
I'll criticize myself for something and then I'll be like, "Oh, I don't care." Or I'll,
Right.
have a projection of someone else's judgment of me and I'm like, "Fuck that, I don't care." And I'm like,
Right.
"Oh, wait, no, like I
I,
care deeply." And that's
yes.
the point is to let yourself care, let yourself feel it and move through it. See what's on the
Yeah.
other side of that.
Yes. I heard recently, this was back during like all the protests during COVID, and someone said that hatred is not the opposite of love, apathy is.
Mm,
Like
yeah, I've
true
heard that.
not giving a fuck. Like that's a death sentence. So I mean, and
Hmm.
it's crazy how powerful that can be to realize that like, oh, I'm using this as a self-protective mechanism, and then to shift that, like your whole life can change after that.
Hmm. It can and it will.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh man. Well, Scott, thank you so, so much. This
Mm-hmm.
episode was really important. I
Yeah.
mean, super, super packed with so many gems, so many lessons. And honestly, I feel like we still could have gone on and on and on. So maybe I'll have to have you back at some
Sure.
point here in the near
I'd love that.
future.
Yeah, you're so welcome, and thank you for um, both like your attentiveness and your questioning and your preparation. I mean, it truly speaks to how much this truly lights you up, and to be another
Yeah.
example on the path of like, you know, very much subscribing to the narratives of what society tells us we need to be, and then having these awakening moments to be like, you know what, there might be a different way, and being
Hmm.
a guiding light for other people to see that, you know, we're more than what we were sold to believe we were supposed to do while we were here. So thank you for your commitment to helping
Absolutely.
people wake up and embody their joys and their sorrows.
Yeah.
It's been
Yeah.
wonderful to get to know you and to share this conversation. And I look forward to the next one.
Yes, you too. Absolutely. Thank you. And people can reach you online on Instagram at the Frozen Yogi.
Correct.
And where is that handle used elsewhere?
Instagram, TikTok, all my breathwork playlists on Spotify.
Amazing.
Um, yeah, Facebook,
Okay.
LinkedIn,
We'll link
all
it
the norms.
below
Yeah,
and your website, integratedindividual.com. Again, we'll link it below. I
cool.
am also so excited. I'm coming to Maui this summer.
Oh my
So,
goodness, awesome,
yeah, in July. So, I'll have the
amazing.
opportunity to meet you in person, hopefully.
That would be
Maybe we
wonderful.
can do some breath work together, some meditating.
Done. Sounds
Yes.
wonderful.
All right,
Awesome.
Scott. Well, thank you so much again. I appreciate
Mm,
your time and look forward to talking again soon.
It's
thank you,
time
Emily.
for us to wake up. It's time for us to wake up. It's time for us to wake up. Wake up and come.